Imagine being in prison 29 years for nothing. You didn't do it. As a matter of fact, they said you didn't do it. You had an alibi. The witness said it was another person. You still go to prison. Unbelievable. Put it up for a mask. True story. A black man spent 29 years in jail despite evidence of his innocence. Chicago. 29 years in prison despite his alibi. Victim's sister identifying a different shooter. And co-defendants recanting their statements and said, hey, we were coerced into those lies. Robert Johnson spent nearly 30 years in prison for a murder he did not commit. He was finally freed. Here's what happened. Let me take you back to 1996. Robert Johnson was 16 years of age when the police walked him out of his grandmother's home. This was April 1996, and arrested him for the murder of a Mr. Eddie J. Binion. Mr. Binion was fatally shot during a home invasion when a group of men wearing masks stormed his apartment and took off with drugs and cash. And you heard that they had on masks, okay? The next day, police arrested Johnson's friend and two other teenage boys whom prosecutors coerced into pinning the murder on Johnson in exchange for plea deals, according to the Exoneration Project. Whoa, already day one, technically day two, corruption starts. Literally arrest a random black teenager, arrest those connected to him, make sure there's a loose affiliation or some affiliation with the victim, because they got to have access to the apartment somehow. Make the two who had nothing to do with any of this lie on the one. It seems like they have run this play before. Flawless. It was done. Textbook. There's more. So, the night of the murder, Johnson had gone to the convenience store to pick up groceries for his grandmother. His father attested to seeing Johnson leave and return to the apartment building with the groceries. However, the alibi and the corroborating witness statement wasn't enough to release Johnson from police custody. He was convicted of murder, home invasion, armed robbery, and initially sentenced to 80 years in prison. Put his picture back up. He had been on this planet for 16 years. He was a baby. He's facing more time in prison at 16 than he can live. Statement from Johnson, quote, I was just feeling real hopeless. I was going to prison for something I didn't do. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I used to sit there and it was something that almost drove me crazy, Johnson said. Every time a phone rang, I used to think maybe that's them to say, yeah, we made a mistake, let them go. So how did it get overturned? For years, Johnson worked tirelessly to overturn his conviction, writing and submitting motions himself without legal help, adding that he wrote hundreds of letters begging and pleading with different lawyers, organizations, just trying to get somebody to take a look at the case. In 2018, the man who admitted to killing Mr. Binion died. Yes, there was a person who admitted. Shortly after the 1996 shooting, Binion's sister, Evelyn, told the police that Tremaine Taylor bragged that her brother was his first kill and said that he screamed like a little bee when he shot him. However, police told her she was wrong when they presented photos of Johnson and Taylor, and she pointed to the photo of Taylor to identify him as the shooter. Then, starting in 2001, two of the co-defendants who implicated Johnson recanted their statements through multiple written affidavits. An affidavit is sworn testimony, meaning they are attesting under penalty of perjury. And if they're lying on this affidavit, they can be thus arrested. So they signed affidavits that said Johnson neither planned nor executed Binion's murder. However, prosecutors questioned their initial affidavits, noting that they never named Taylor as the actual shooter until after his death. So during that hearing, the co-defendants testified that the detectives who investigated the murder, allegedly investigated the murder, abused and coerced them into incriminating Johnson. Those detectives, James O'Brien and William Moser, have a documented history of abuse and coercion claims, including more than a dozen lawsuits naming O'Brien that cost the city of Chicago $30 million in settlement, defunding the police. A judge vacated Johnson's conviction, seeing the wisdom in the argument. The next day, he walked out of the correctional center a free man. Here's what Johnson said to reporters upon his release, quote, "They had me in that cage for 28 years and 10 months for something I had nothing to do with." End quote. Johnson said, according to the Chicago Sun-Times, quote, "I'm just thankful we got in front of a judge that was honorable and that was fair and finally put an end to this nightmare, this hell on earth that I've been dealing with since I was 16 years old." He says he plans to raise awareness for other people who were wrongly incarcerated, wrongfully convicted for crimes. Quote, "There are a lot of people in prison for things they didn't do." The public, it's like they see it on the news, but it's like they don't relate to it. For some reason, they don't understand its reality. Johnson said that right before his case was revised in court, the state actually offered him a plea deal. They do this routinely. They offered him a plea deal, time served in exchange for a guilty plea. He refused. For Johnson to receive compensation from the state of Illinois for his wrongful conviction, he has also filed a petition to receive a certificate of innocence, which will allow him to start the legal process for damages. Put his picture back up, if you could. This is a hero. Strength beyond understanding. And the one thing he wants to do, he's not bitter, he's not upset, he's not trying to punish people like oligarchs who have billions and political power. He wants to help the least of these. He wants to help the least of these. He's not even launching an attack against the system. He's launching an advocacy for the ones that the system steps on. Beautiful. Anything we can do at Indisputable, dear brother, we are here to help. So sad. Jordan, he can never get those 29 years back. He missed so much. And I know you are one of the strongest advocates I know against incarceration and this senseless caging that we do of human beings. What say you?
Yeah, like you said, he's never going to get those years of his life back. Think about all of the opportunities, all of the experience he was deprived of because what appears to be deliberate malfeasance from the police. I mean, people talk about reforming the police, but when you have people like that with that kind of a mentality, a willingness to be so malicious that they will deliberately turn a blind eye to the truth and ruin someone's life like this. I don't know how a system like that can be reformed. And I don't know how you can, through reform, weed out people and only people like that. So it just makes me question this entire system. I don't know how anyone could look at stories like this, and there are many, and have faith in our justice system, especially when you look at the most powerful and wealthy in this country who seemingly never are held accountable for their wrongdoing. The financial collapse, how many of the perpetrators of the financial collapse of 2008 went to prison?
Right.
So it's just a measure to put the working poor and especially Black Americans in prison so they can then do unpaid or low paid labor for corporate America. So it's just, Ava DuVernay, of course, has that fantastic documentary pointing out how this is just modern day slavery. I could never bring myself to justify preserving this system as it stands.
He was 16 years of age. The individuals, the adults protecting and serving, they committed criminal acts. When the system has an appetite, at some point, they may develop an appetite, hopefully, to prosecute those individuals who do such deeds. Because he's not the only 16-year-old or young Black male they ran that play on. That's the reality. And they should all be locked up. All right, we'll bring you updates as they come.